years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Obamacare, which kind of should have been the red flag from the beginning, just passing something without actually making sure it's something that would actually be better. They don't care as long as it's Republican, but that's just kind of idiotic in the first place, because then you become the people that pass the bill that's terrible. So we'll definitely be diving in that. I also want to get into something the teachers union president believes. Well, we'll kind of get into that and, some more when it comes to the youth in today's society. I'm going to go ahead and start off with Ron Paul Liberty Report today. Ron Paul got asked quite a few questions on this Liberty Report, and one of them's migrant crisis, and the other one is secession, and they talk about some more things, but if you haven't paid too much attention to the news, you might have missed that California is continuing to push for secession. So, how realistic is it, and do we still believe that states have that right? I would say in today's society, you're seeing more of a thought process behind it, but there's still a lot of old guard that say, oh, no, you can't allow the United States to start dissolving. That would be a statist. I think that if we can progress to something better, I don't want to fall down into a thing where we become victims to outside forces. But that also goes back to not just evolving from maybe the government we have now to something better, but having society be able to acknowledge threats and defend itself, and know that, yeah, you might want certain people in certain positions. There's things that I don't know how to do, and you probably wouldn't want to put me in charge of them. There's quite a bit I can do. And there's many different places you could put me, but there's places you probably should have put me in. So I think that in today's society, I still don't see it as something realistic. I think I see it more as a, you know, a good talk rather than actual secession. But we'll go ahead and get into this Ron Paul Liberty Report, and we'll talk some more about it here.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
I understand that we're going to do a program a little differently, although we've done it before, that some of our viewers get to ask me a question.
You're in the hot seat today.
Yep, so I'll have to brush up on this
real
fast.
We haven't done it for a while, but people always seem to enjoy it, and I know how much you like answering these questions. So why don't we go ahead and get started right away and turn to the first one.
Don't make them too tough.
This is from Nick Carden. Should the idea of secession be talked about more as a means of decentralization?
Well, that's an easy one because it's certainly not only talked about, but it's practiced too. But talking about it is important, essentially because there should be a right to secession. It was assumed when our country was set up that secession would be legitimate, and so it was demolished, of course, during the Civil War period. But early in our history, it was assumed the Northeast part of our country thought they would like to secede. But the right of secession, the right of leaving, is so important. So not only should we discuss it, we should protect the right. That doesn't mean we have to endorse secession. Matter of fact, right now, we'd want to know what the circumstances are. I do think about Texas seceding once in a while, but I want to know the circumstances because, our state governments sometimes can be very abusive too. So you want to know what's going on. But the right of secession, if that would have been maintained, even though never practiced, it would have restrained the federal government. Just as nullification would do the same thing in a similar way. If the states could nullify bad federal laws, this would be very, very helpful. And, of course, jury nullification would be a method to undo some bad laws as well. But secession should be there, and it should be available, and it should be talked about. It should be understood, and people shouldn't be told this is horrible, that you are un-American. But if you're pro-liberty, you're pro-secession. And it's worked. We seceded from England. That was a good idea. Unfortunately, it didn't go well to make that point during our Civil War. But just recently in our history, what do you call the breaking up of the Soviet system? That was secession. They had control of a lot of Eastern Europe and many countries, and they essentially seceded from the Soviet Union. And that, to me, was very, very good. So I think that is fine. But even now, the international governmental bodies, like the European Union or United Nations, these different places, we should always have a right to secede. And that's what the British did. They left the European Union. It hasn't been finalized, and they're still working on it. But that restrains big government from doing things that the individual states or the individual units don't like. So secession should be there. Matter of fact, if we'd have followed the original intent of the Declaration, there wouldn't have been too much talk about secession because most of the states would be rather independent and they would be loosely connected for a few things, maybe like one sound currency and maybe national defense, but it wouldn't be the monolith that we have today. So the more we talk about secession, and the better it is for us. But the best way to do this is talk about the right to leave an organization, and that is what we need to establish. And though that principle was well understood early on, I think we have forgotten about it, and we cannot depend on our government schools to actually teach that to our kids because they would be kicked out of school rather quickly if a teacher said, we ought to have a right to secede if we don't like what they're doing. It's almost heresy or un-American, but it's very American to think that there's a voluntary aspect of people coming together, and you should be able to leave if you decide that those in charge aren't doing the right thing. So I'm all for secession, especially the right of secession.
Okay, well, let's move along then to question number 2. Let's see what else we have in store. Stephen Hans asks you, is Trump the anti-war president?
That's an interesting question because I've thought about the in campaigns just who's the anti-war candidate, and my general theory is that the anti-war is a positive in our campaigns, no matter how militant the rhetoric is. Just think back to Woodrow Wilson. I kept the American people out of war. I'm not going to let your boys go overseas. Same thing with Roosevelt, and they came across as the peace candidate. And even when Richard Nixon won, he was the one that was going to stop the Vietnam War, but didn't do it, of course. But he was seen as more peaceful. And of course, in this recent election, there's been a recent article out not too long ago since the election that said that Hillary probably benefited more than most people suspect because she was not the peace candidate. She was seen as the war candidate. And so no matter how strong the rhetoric is and no matter how strong the propaganda is, that you have to be pro-war and pro-military and all of these things that people are asking for. The truth is how many people are going to say, I'm going to vote for this guy because I think he's going to start a war. They don't do that subtly. Many people say, well, we'd like to end these wars. Our problem, though, in this country is that the wars are started illegally, unconstitutionally, immorally, and we get in so deep that it's very hard to get out. And then they say, well, are you going to desert the troops? Or are these people that died, our troops that have died, are they going to have died in vain if we don't come across with a victory? So therefore, we have to march on. Now, Donald Trump, I believe, benefited by being seen as the anti-war candidate. But he was also said things that were very, very strong militarily. He's appointed a lot of military people to office in the administration. And I happen to think his policies are not the best policies for maintaining peace and order because I think he has switched around. I like the idea that he talked with a softer tone dealing with Russia, and yet today the administration is going along with the strong rhetoric of the neoconservatives. So even though I think he was seen as the candidate that was more likely to bring us peace, I think unfortunately the people who are promoting war, antagonism, and neoconservatism and our world presence, have been winning the fight. But you can't have this world view that we are the leaders of the world and we have a responsibility to provide, dictatorship to countries and get rid of the bad guys and on, that we get involved in the internal affairs of other nations, because that is what leads to war. And right now we've been talking about, sanctions, putting tougher sanctions on Russia and on Iran and on North Korea, saying, well, this is necessary. Well, I think those types of things are more likely to cause war than not being very strong on sanctions. So it's a mixed bag. I think Trump has benefited by coming across more sensibly as a candidate. But I think the control in the government and our foreign policy right now is being dictated by those that I consider quite dangerous and moving us toward a potential military conflict. And that I don't like.
Yeah. All right, we'll move right along then to number 3. If we can get that going. And this is from Adam Rothstein. Do you think the Republican Party will eventually evolve to become more libertarian?
Well, let's hope so. When you use the word libertarian, you might turn off some people because they tend to destroy good words. Why is progressive a bad word? Progressivism is a bad word. They have been some of the worst statists in the world. They call themselves progressive. And how about liberal? If you're liberal, you believed in liberty, but nobody wants to be a liberal, especially if you lean toward constitutional conservatism and libertarianism. Libertarianism, though, has withstood some of that criticism. But libertarianism, or the influence of individual liberty, is very important to me and to what we're doing in our efforts to keep our country out of war. So this is very important. The question is will the Republican Party become more libertarian? And I say yes, it will be. But it won't be by itself. If it becomes more libertarian, the Democrats are going to become more libertarian. It became the opposite, more progressive liberal in the worst sense of the word. And but it wasn't the Democrats that led the charge. It was both parties, because it's the ideas that direct the policies. And it's what's happening in our universities. And it has been very progressive liberal in a negative way. And that is what dominated the parties. Right now, there's a more influence than ever about the ideas of liberty. And it's creeping into the system. There's been much more influence now than in a long time. So when it comes, it will be influence both parties. For instance, economic policy taught by our universities for the past 50, 75 years has all been liberalism, big banks, central banking, paper money, Keynesianism, all of this. This is what is spewed out by our universities and by our colleges. So I would say that when the time comes that we are more believers, it will be a prevailing attitude by the people, and they will influence both parties. And we already have seen some signs of this. The inroads that we have made, unfortunately, maybe looking like they're being set back. The influence that we have made on the war on drugs has been, very good. It's been bipartisan, and they've mellowed their tone about how many people get put in prison. Unfortunately, there's an effort to reverse that. But no, when it comes, it will be bipartisan, and it may be that the Republicans will lead a charge on economic liberty more so than the Democrats. But right now, it seems like all the bad things going on too often are bipartisan. We'd like to change that.
All right. Moving along, this is the final challenge for you, the final question from our readers. We have a lot more, obviously, than we can take on each show, and we appreciate everyone participating. But if we can call up the last one, this is from Amerikaner. How to solve the migrant crisis?
Simple little question, right?
Yeah.
Well,
2 minutes or less.
The migrant crisis didn't come out of the clear blue. I mean, it is probably an unintended consequences on the most part, but it could be intended by some of the evil people in the world too that like to disrupt, and it's very disruptive. Well, you're not going to get rid of the migrant crisis until our foreign policy. We contribute a lot to the migrant crisis because of the Mideastern wars that would have been minimal and much smaller if we hadn't decided, 15 years ago that we had to remake the Middle East. And because that has been such a tragic error and such terrible things happening to this, and so many lives lost, so many people's homes lost, that people would walk hundreds, if not thousands of miles just to try to get out of there. And look at what it's done to Europe. Europe has a much greater crisis than we do. And yet it's not only as a result of bad foreign policy and the wars going on in the Middle East, it's this cultural Marxism that actually encourages, they open up the doors and say, we love them, and migrants just come in. That doesn't mean you hate migrants, but you try to understand it. But if you subsidize them and pay for them and take care of them and they have an excuse to leave someplace else, you're going to get a lot of them and you're going to cause a crisis. And that is what's going to happen. The people that have not lived under those conditions are going to resent it. And that's why there's more problems in Europe right now. And we have that to a large degree as well. But our tradition in America has been to accept immigrants and be pretty generous about it. But recently, because we have committed so many of, we have caused so many of the problems in the Middle East, there's been sympathy for those people that have truly suffered, and we bring them in. But they unfortunately get tremendous benefits from the people who are struggling to make a living in this country, and they get subsidized and they get moved in front of the line for some of their social benefits. That is so different than normal, natural, voluntary immigration where people come in and they come in to get a job and go to work. So there's a lot of things going on there. But right now, I would say that the so-called crisis looks to me like it might have calmed down a little bit. And there was Scott Ritter, the person we had on the program the other day, had an article out today that he's predicting that there's going to be no regime change in Syria. Well, if that's the case, that means that ISIS is losing, because it's ISIS and the terrorists and the radicals coming in, participating with our encouragement to overthrow that government. And it also might be a reflection of, in that area, ISIS has not been doing so well if they're making predictions that there will not be regime change. So the pressure is off a little bit, but it's not going to disappear, and you're not going to solve it until we as a people and as a government have a foreign policy that is completely different, that we are not interventionists. We don't tell people how to live. We don't get involved in border disputes, and we don't get involved in internal affairs of other nations. And then we don't give subsidies to the people who come. We don't reward people for coming. And we try to promote our goodness by setting a good example, defending liberty here, providing a better economy. Under those conditions, I am absolutely convinced that if you have those conditions, you really are looking for people to come and do some jobs. The jobs go wanting. So they're not invaders who are going to live off people who are struggling to pay their own bills. So it's quite a bit different. The answer is there. To wave a wand and get rid of this crisis ongoing is not easy, but you don't have a chance of solving this problem unless you deal with our foreign policy and you deal with the subsidies that we give people when they do come here, and recognize the fact that the greatest thing that we can offer as Americans is an opportunity to live in a free society. That should be our goal. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. And now, he was talking on there about the sanctions, but I'll get to that here in a second. But you hear this talk about California succeeding, but I doubt any actual thing will happen about that. But you also have to look at how the world views it. A lot of people don't know, Britain was going to, kind of work with the Confederate States because that was their supply of cotton. And there were a few things that happened that made Britain go, okay, yeah, we probably shouldn't support them. With how the United Nations, the EU, and these governing bodies that are trying to centralize power, if a state tries to secede and our government wasn't going for it, do you think that the international body would recognize it? There are Native American, groups that live on the reservation, have tried to get the international bodies to recognize them as, their own people, separate from the United States. That if the United States wants them to be a part of it, that there needs to be a formal treaty that is recognized too by the international bodies. And it hasn't happened. So the realistic view would be like, no, it's not going to happen. I do want to cover this article. Something that was talked about was the sanctions, more sanctions on Russia and Iran, and does it really prevent war? Look at how sanctioned and cast off North Korea has been, and now we're worried about them being able to hit us with a nuke. Well, this out of the Libertarian Republic, Iran makes not so subtle subtle threat against U.S. forces after Trump's sanctions. The chief of staff of Iran's military made a veiled threat against U.S. forces abroad Thursday in response to Trump administration's new sanctions against the country. Major General Mohammed Bagheri warned the U.S. that applying new sanctions and designate Iran's paramilitary Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terror group would be a risk to U.S. forces in the Middle East. Counting the Revolutionary Guards the same as terrorist groups and applying similar sanctions to Revolutionary Guards is a big risk for America and its bases and forces deployed in the region, said Bagheri, according to Reuters. The Trump administration announced a new round of sanctions against Iran's ballistic missile program Tuesday. U.S. officials are also reportedly considering designating the IRGC as a terrorist organization. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani also expressed his disappointment with the sanctions, promising an appropriate response. The IRGC is Iran's paramilitary force, which operates parallel to Iran's traditional armed forces. It has tremendous economic and political influence across the country and is traditionally close to the supreme leader and other hardline members of the Iranian government. IRGC forces are responsible for foreign military operations, including support of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime and various other proxy groups in the Middle East. The group is believed to have supplied weapons to Iraqi insurgents, which were used to kill American troops during the U.S. occupation. U.S. forces have not come in direct conflict with the IRGC forces currently, but have had engaged in defense attacks against pro-Assad proxy groups in Syria. So you have an issue that is only furthered along by the we're more powerful and we can do this to you. I'm sure people have seen some of the videos on YouTube, the bully videos, where you have someone bullying other people and eventually that person snaps. What usually happens to the bully? They poke someone too long and that person actually showed that they might not be big, they might not, be the most powerful person, but they're going to whoop your butt. And maybe even in normal circumstances, they might not even be able to do it. But you brought it out in them. And I think as we have so much internal problems, what the government, I think, would start feeling is pressure from both fronts, foreign and here at home, and that's going to cause the authoritarian power grab. I also think that countries are seeing the internal problems. And yes, I do think they're trying to help influence a lot of that. I think there's also people here, people that are wealthy and powerful in American politics that are also working to stir division. And right now is probably not the best time to go poking. Not saying that Iran's the greatest country, no. But sorry, I'm having a little issue. Okay. If we're going to spread ourselves any thinner, or if we're going to antagonize any more things that can potentially threaten, we're going to see that authoritarian power grab. It's going to eventually happen. And this is just not working out here. We also have, you know, the whole China thing going on, where it seems like we work with them, but there's definitely distrust and some type of underlying, you know, dislike between the U.S. and China. And a couple of days ago, you know, dealing Middle East, we're doing all this, Russia and China and North Korea. This out of Reuters, Chinese jets intercept U.S. surveillance plane, says U.S. officials. 2 Chinese fighter jets intercepted a U.S. Navy surveillance plane over the East China Sea at the weekend, with one jet coming within 300 feet of the American aircraft, U.S. officials said on Monday. The officials, speaking on condition of anonymity, said initial reports showed one of these J-10 Chinese aircraft came close enough to the U.S. EP-3 plane on Sunday to cause the American aircraft to change direction. One of the officials said the Chinese jet was armed and the interception happened 80 nautical miles from the Chinese city of Qingdao. The Pentagon said the encounter between the aircraft was unsafe, but added that the vast majority of interactions were safe. Close-in reconnaissance by U.S. aircraft threatens China's national security. Hold on, I kind of jumped here. China's defense ministry said the actions of its pilots were legal, necessary, and professional, and performed in accordance with the law and the rules. Close-in reconnaissance by U.S. aircraft threatens China's national security, harms Sino-U.S. maritime and air military safety, endangers the personal safety of both sides' pilots, and is the root cause of unexpected incidents, it said. The United States should immediately stop these military activities, which are unsafe, unprofessional, and unfriendly, added. Incidents such as Sunday's intercept are relatively common. In May, 2 Chinese Su-30 aircraft intercepted a U.S. aircraft designed to detect radiation while it was flying in international airspace over the East China Sea. China closely monitors any U.S. military activity around its coastline. In 2001, an intercept of a U.S. spy plane by a Chinese fighter jet resulted in a collision that killed the Chinese pilot and forced the American plane to make an emergency landing at a base in Henan. The 24 U.S. air crew members were held for 11 days until Washington apologized for the incident. That encounter soured U.S.-Chinese relations in the early days of President George W. Bush's first term in office. Separately, the Pentagon said the U.S. military would soon carry out another test of its thermal high-altitude area defense THAAD system. These tests are done as a routine measure to ensure the system is ready, and they are scheduled well in advance of any other real-world geopolitical events going on, Pentagon spokesman Captain Jeff Davis told reporters. The director of the Missile Defense Agency, Lieutenant General Sam Greaves, said in a statement that a test would be carried out in the Pacific Spaceport Complex in Alaska. Last month, the United States shot down a simulated incoming intermediate-range ballistic missile similar to ones being developed by countries like North Korea in a test of its nation's THAAD missile defense. The United States deployed THAAD to South Korea this year to guard against North Korea's shorter-range missiles. That has drawn fierce criticism from China, which says the system's powerful radar can penetrate deep into its territory. So it seems like we're taking on way too much, way too fast. Go to antiwar.com. Just read through, the latest news articles. Iran, slamming us. Libyan unity government key general agree ceasefire. U.S. senators promise to amend Israel boycott bill. Saudi lobbying fund new anti-Qatar ads in the U.S. 26 troops killed as Taliban storms Kandahar base. House overwhelmingly okays new Russia sanctions. So we really need to watch how thin we're spreading ourselves, definitely when our own climate here domestically is so messy. I really even look at our society as being extremely messy. And this kind of segues into something I kind of wanted to cover, because at this point, when I look around society, being a strong male is almost looked down upon. Now, out where I live, more rural America and flyover America, that might not be so true. But when you look at the pop culture, and when you realize the, big cities in America, and, you have California, New York, these states that they have these pockets and centralized communities that it's about pop culture. It's being, it's demasculizing the males. And I don't believe people need to act, a certain way. But when I say that, it's causing these people to even look at, another man that is masculine. You're trying to be over people. No, I'm just trying to be, the best I can be. Being a man in today's society is almost looked down upon, which kind of segues me into this clip from Stefan Molyneux, The Death of Masculinity, Why Men Will Rise Again. Now, I kind of hope that, I start seeing, hey, it's cool to be a masculine man. It's kind of needed because right now, as someone that works in, the industry that requires physical labor, a lot of what I see anymore is, oh, that's too hard. Oh, and I look at it and it's like, it's not cool to work hard, especially for the man. It's almost like now we've reversed the rules where a woman can work hard, but not, we don't want them out in doing the labor. We want them in the office doing that type of labor, and then they should make as much as the people working hard. Well, that might be part of it. Hey, if the woman's doing the same job I'm doing, pay them the same amount I'm getting paid. But when I put my body through abuse, it seems kind of hypocritical to pay someone, more to sit back and just, and believe me, carpal tunnel, I get that. My hands cramp up all the time where I, look like a dinosaur. But my whole body hurts. So I've done physical labor my whole life. Ever since I could work, I've done it. So I want to get into this, and we'll talk about this at the end of this clip here.
Was 2 years ago, and in the process, I witnessed my father become a shadow of his former self. Now, all around me, I see what appear to be broken men and emasculated young boys. Anyone listening to your show should know the causes of this fall of man, the consequences of which are deep, personal, and far-reaching. In this era, what can a youth like myself do to be a real man amid such hostility towards masculinity and animosity towards the traditional concept of manliness? That's from Connor.
Oh, hey, Connor. How you doing?
Hey, Steph. I'm doing really well.
Tell me about what happened with your dad, if you don't mind. People who haven't seen this kind of scenario probably could benefit from hearing about it.
So basically what happened, so I was gone at the time. I'm a Mormon, so I was on a mission. So I was gone for 2 years, and about halfway through, I didn't know that there were any problems with my parents' marriage. I had no idea. And then I got a phone call that they were separating, and that was a complete shocker for me. I had no idea what was going on. And when I got back, I lived with my dad just because I've always been a little bit closer to my dad. I have always loved and had a good relationship with my mom, but I just have always been closer with my dad. We just have personalities that mesh. So when I got back home, I remember he just the way he was just so depressed, and he felt so awful about himself. He very much blamed himself for what happened. That they'd been separated. He wasn't unfaithful or anything. that it's a bit complicated how it ended up happening. But in any case, so he felt a lot of blame. And when I started digging into it, like, to give you an idea of how crippled he seemed compared to the, strong man that I'd always known. He told me that that he was going to go to court with my mom, and he said, "I'm not going to get a lawyer. I'm just going to go because I feel so horrible. I'm just going to go in like as myself, like, naked essentially." And I told him, like, "Dad, wake up, like get off your knees, like get up, stand up and stand up for yourself." And I started to help him understand that while yeah, he may have made a mistake, at the end of the day, it was my mom's decision to leave. And I started learning more when he told me about the psychologist that they went to go see, that he and my mom went to go see before their marriage ended. And he just told me basically what the stuff that the doctor had told him, that the psychologist had told him. And my mom had been reading books that. Sorry, this might seem a little bit jumbled, but she was reading a lot of books around about the time that she left, that where it was talking about, to give you an idea, like the titles were Putting Away the Nice Girl Syndrome, and all these like female horrific books about female empowerment and stuff like that are really just man-hating books. And so she projected this image onto my dad of this horrible, abusive, evil monster. And the psychologist that my parents were working with, he echoed the same thing. My dad was telling me the stuff that he said, and my dad believed it, that at his heart, my dad was this horrible, abusive person. And there were things about his nature that just simply could not be changed. And it made me really, really angry, because my dad is not a horrible, evil, abusive monster. and he came to believe all that. And so I don't think it was particularly healthy for me, but I kind of essentially was his therapist in some ways. Like, I was his only outlet really to talk to when I got back home. And what else would you like to know?
Why did she divorce him?
So from what I understand, my mother, previous to them getting married, my mother had a relationship with somebody. From what I understand, and my dad was always jealous of this relationship, and so every so often he would bring up. He would use it almost like a tool, almost as a. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, he would use it as a tool to have influence.
He'd make you feel bad about this prior relationship.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah. It was not an often thing. Like, the number of times that my parents had like arguments was few and far between. Like, there was never any yelling in my house. When my dad was away from home and my mom was trying to get us to do stuff, there might be a little bit of yelling, but other than that, not really. And if I'm being honest, I think my mom left because she caught the feminism bug.
Oh yeah, that there's this whole world of authentic empowerment and liberty and freedom, and you get to free yourself from the chains of marriage and the oppressive patriarch and blah blah blah, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that my mom understands all the minutia of it, but I mean,
men are susceptible to superhero fantasies and women are susceptible to victim narratives. It's just one of the basic differences.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm going to go to war and I'm going to win. That's the man's sort of weakness for superhero, and it's like, I've been hard done by. My natural self has been prevented from expressing itself, and I don't have a voice. It's like, yeah, it's just it's the two weaknesses of the genders.
Yeah, I suppose so. So. I mean, it makes sense. And fortunately, my dad did end up getting a lawyer, a really good one. And because I think my mom was expecting, as it happens in most, it seems, divorce cases. I mean, if you think of any divorced couple, who do the kids always end up with? It tends to be with the mom. I think my mother was expecting that my dad would roll over, and I'm glad I got home and talked to him before he did do that.
Right.
And
you could
so,
have been raised by a feminist.
Exactly. It's insane. Like talking to it's been very difficult to have, like, it's very confusing for me because I have always had a very good relationship with both of my parents. I've always been closer to my dad just because I think personality wise, we're more similar, but with my mom, I've always had a good relationship. I could always talk to her. And I think because she was married, she tended to have very similar opinions to my dad, like politically and everything. And I could talk to her about a lot of things that were controversial, and there wasn't really an issue. Like she would always say, "Oh, how interesting," and stuff like that. But now, it's quite the opposite. She is a lot more closed to that sort of thing, and I mean, it makes sense because it makes sense that she would be close to those issues like feminism and stuff like that, because it really is what is justifying her lifestyle at the moment.
Right. What age range was your mom in when she got into this stuff?
When she got into the horrible books. So my parents are both around 50 right now, and it happened just about 2 years ago, a little more than like 3. Oh wow, like 3 years ago. Yeah.
So there's another kind of pattern as well. You know, everyone talks about the midlife crisis of men. Nobody talks about the midlife crisis of women. The midlife crisis of women.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah.
When you lose your sexual market value, and for women, it happens like literally overnight sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge challenge. There's a huge challenge. Women get into politics, women get into feminism, women get into all kinds of stuff when their sexual market value declines. And I have no problem with that at all. I think it's great to get into various ideas. Unfortunately, though, it's like there's this massive swing from dominance to victimhood, right? Because as I talked about with the young woman earlier, when women are young and in their prime, there's a huge amount of sexual market value power, and combined with the fact that democracy is not fair between the genders, because women outvote men, because women live longer than men.
Yeah.
And so women have greater needs from government because women can end up as single moms, and women's health care is more expensive than men's health care. And so women have greater needs from government, and women outvote men. You can't do anything about that. I mean, within the context of the system as it stands, women are always going to outvote men. There's really nothing you can do about it. Yes. And so for some reason, women go from power when they're young to victimhood when they get older. But the victimhood gives them another kind of power. You understand? It is when they have sexual power, it's because they're being desired. But when they end up with negative power, like that's kind of positive power, like the reward of sexual access and all that kind of stuff. Sorry to talk about your mom this way, but you know what I mean. And so that's kind of positive power where women are desired. So then when a woman loses her sexual market value power, well, she still wants power. So how does she get it? Well, she gets it by being a victim. She gets it by being a victim, and then she gets to dominate people not by being sexually desirable, but by being a victim who nags and who is angry and who is impatient and who is short-tempered and who is always right. Right? See, when you're young as a woman, nobody tells you that you're wrong because they all want to get in your pants. I mean, of course, right? You don't get heavily criticized as a woman when you're young because high sexual market value and so on. So then when you get older, there's a sort of tipping point as a woman where men are going to shockingly start to tell you the truth because your sexual market value has vanished, right? And so then how do you keep men from telling you the truth or people from telling you the truth? Well, you become a brittle, angry feminista, right? And you become a victim, and then you get, you nag people and you get angry, and now still no one can tell you anything or correct you. And this is, I don't know how to solve any of this. I'm just sort of trying to describe it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I understand. And it's the reason why it's so frustrating and confusing for me is that I hate to look at my mom in that way because it's never been like that traditionally, if you understand what I mean. I mean, the thing that made me so frustrated with her about all of this is that, so she accuses my dad of being this horrible, evil, horrific monster. And to me, I think, well, how did you not realize this before? You were married to him for 25 years. So how did this
false
not
consciousness?
I didn't have this part of my brain. I mean, leftists do this all the time, false consciousness. Why is it that construction workers look at their boss with sympathy who has to stay all night dealing with invoices and angry suppliers and irate customers and taxes, and they're like, whoa, I'm so glad we get to go home. Why is it that the workers are so happy and would never want to be the boss? Well, false consciousness, you see, it's not that it's a rational exchange of particular values and virtues and that there's costs and benefits to being both a worker and a boss. They just say it's false consciousness, that they are angry, they just don't know it. And then what they do is to the leftists, what they do if they get a hold of these kinds of people is they say, well, we're now telling you the truth, but what they're doing is creating resentment that wasn't there before. And then they say, oh, the resentment always was there. It just didn't come out till we told you the truth. But the reality is that you no more had resentment than you have tranquilizer before somebody blows a blow dart into your neck, right? It's like, well, I'm just liberating the tranquilizer that was there initially or originally. It's like, no, you put this poison into my system. And so, yeah, this is one of these self-fulfilling prophecies. You know, the moment you know the truth, you're going to get really angry. The truth is you're a victim. The truth is there are assholes all around you. The truth is, right? And then next thing you know, you're angry. It's like, I see, I told you the truth, and now you're angry. It's like, nope, you just stoked someone up. That's not the same as telling them the truth. Yeah, I mean, and it's frustrating because, there really are only two options here. Either my dad was, in fact, an abusive, horrible monster, and my mom is just incredibly ignorant and stupid, which she's not. So that can't be it. I guess that there's a third option, that my dad suddenly turned into a horrible, evil, abusive monster. But I don't find that likely because, I mean, in my experience since I've been home, my dad has only been a better person. After this, he's been incredibly humbled, that's for sure. And really the only two options are that either he was or he wasn't. So, I mean, that's what's really frustrating for me. But I guess going back more to my question is that when I came home, he really was a shell and a shadow of himself. And I kind of started to notice more, especially listening to your show and listening to a lot of other people talk, and just, I'd always kind of known this because, you know, growing up in the Mormon church, my seminary teacher, he was a very conservative, right-wing libertarian, and he would show us, you know, well, he'd explain to us like how men have been ripped on for so long, like with just, you know, The Simpsons. Homer Simpson is a retard, you know, essentially.
Well, and every single, the girls are always geniuses and the boys are always dumb. Like, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen a show called Modern Family.
No, I haven't.
So in it, there's a young boy. I guess he's not young anymore. He's a teenager now, maybe late teens. And there's a girl. And the girl is played by an actress named Ariel Winter. And she had it rough. I think she's legally separated from her mother. Not particularly smart, but she's portrayed as the genius in the show, right? Now, the boy is, of course, inevitably portrayed as an idiot, right? He's dumb. Now, the reality is the boy is really, really intelligent, like the actual actor who plays him. Like Superman's a crazy high IQ, really, really smart, straight A's in everything he touches, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, Ariel Winter, I mean, she's, you know, I guess nice enough person, but she's sure showing a lot of skin on the internet kind of stuff, right? So she's using her sexual market value. So she's supposed to be the genius in the family, and the boy has to be dumb. But in reality, I'm not saying she's dumb, but the boy, for sure, the actor is a genius. And this is just inevitable. And it's part of the leftist plan, you know, stoke women full of ambition, and genetically it's not likely to pan out because, as we've talked about before, at the very highest levels of IQ, it's just a bit of a sausage fest. That's just the way that nature has played things out. If it's sexist, well, we can blame Mother Nature, who apparently is a female, for all this sexism. But It's you always have to portray the women as geniuses, and it's funny thing too is that you say like this thing in feminism where they say, well, the reason that there aren't more female engineers is they're not mentored enough. You see, they don't get enough examples. Exactly. They need mentoring. They need to see female engineers in order to realize that they could become female engineers. It's like, how retarded is that? Women who would have so little respect. Well, a woman can't possibly think she could be an engineer unless she saw a female engineer. It's like, what?
Well,
I mean,
they think the women, they really think like it. I mean, you know, there's the whole idea that they're projecting their own thoughts and their own belittling of women onto conservatives. Like that's all it is.
You have to portray women as so stupid that they can't possibly think they could be engineers. But the funny thing is, they say, well, see, little girls, they need to see scientists so that they can imagine. They need to be mentored. They need female examples. They need female mentors and so on, right? And then you say, well, don't little boys, kids of single moms, need male role models? Don't they need fathers? Oh no. It's so one-sided. Yeah. If women need mentors, little girls need mentors in order to grow up into fine young women, and they need female examples and female mentoring. Don't little boys need fathers? Oh no. Yeah. No, that's different mystery-wise.
The self-unawareness of these people is really staggering.
Well, no, it's not. It's not. Their purpose is not self-awareness. Their purpose is power. Their purpose is propaganda, and their purpose is the destruction of the attractiveness of Western women. But sorry, go ahead.
What I'm saying is that, I mean, coming from myself, I mean, I don't know how, I generally perceive myself as a little bit more self-aware than they are. So, I mean, it's hard. So. It's hard to imagine being in a spot like that. It's hard to imagine being so self-unaware. That's what I'm saying.
Well, then why is it that girls do so badly without fathers? If girls only need female mentors and moms can be just as well. I mean, why is it that girls who grow up without fathers statistically do pretty terribly? I mean, women are not good at being the only parent. I mean, I don't know, men, I don't know if it's been studied that much. I've heard some positive indications. I haven't seen anything final. But that's not the issue. The issue is that women are bad at being single moms. But women are bad at being parents if there's no husband around. They're certainly bad at being providers for obvious reasons, and they're bad at being parents. But women and boys suffer from single moms, but you can't talk about that because leftists need single moms so that they can keep growing the state. I mean, they don't care about kids. They don't care about the survival of the family. They don't care about the survival of civilization. Hell, they don't want it to survive in its current form. Right. They just want more and more power. And like any drug dealer who wants to grow his empire, he can get more and more people addicted. Fantastic. And you can get, on the left, more and more people addicted to the state by smashing the family. Damn, that family's got to go because power is the only star they guide their horrible ship by.
Yeah. So and I mean, going back to my question about being a man, it's frustrating for me too because I mean this culture has. I mean, you should know the Mormon Church is incredibly conservative.
But they've had their social justice warriors in more recently too, haven't they?
We very much have. There is a direct and as also like the idea is not to reform the church. The idea is to destroy the church, and that's. At least that's what it seems to be. But I look up at a lot of people who, at a lot of the men in our church, and you know, like about the boomer age and some of the older Gen Xers, and they'll get up onto the pulpit like when they give a talk or whatever, and they'll say something to the effect of. Or the other way around. The women will get up and they will bear their testimony or whatever. They'll be up at the pulpit and they'll say something to the effect of, "Oh yeah, I raised 5 boys, my 4 children and my husband." And the crowd laughs. And men often say, like all the time, the older men in the church who are often very overweight, and you know they just don't look like. I guess if you look back to old, I think old propaganda is a good. It's almost a good way to. I think it's a good thing to look at as far as like what manliness should look like in a way. Because if you look at like 1940s World War II propaganda, all the men you see are really muscular, really intelligent looking, well groomed and stuff like that. And the men I see today, I mean, they don't seem to take very good care of themselves. And it doesn't seem like they held themselves really in that high esteem either, because they talk about themselves like they talk about their the things like she's my better half and stuff like that. But to the extent of like,
no, but that's so pathetic.
I know.
No. And I want to point this out. It's like men have the capacity. We have the capacity to laugh at ourselves because we're not insecure, weak idiots. Right. So yes, I can make fun of myself and all that, but for women to make fun of women, and it's like, when did women get to be so fragile? I mean, one of the things that Alex de Tocqueville said about democracy in America, in the famous book Democracy in America, was he said that the foundation of the excellence of American society was in the strength and character and resilience of the women. Women used to be beasts. They used to be monsters. They used to be incredibly strong and incredibly able. And they used to, trust pigs and run farms. And, they used to just raise kids and they strong educators. And they used to be pillars of the community and founders of charities. And they used to just have incredible influence in society and fantastic writers. There's all they say, it's also sexist against women. It's like, not in the fiction world, because women's language skills are equal to, if not superior to men. And therefore, women dominate in many ways in the writing world. And that's all of the unfairness that there is in the world, right? And so women in the West, and they used to be incredible. They used to just be fantastic. They didn't used to be these like neurotic, insecure, aggressive, manipulative, SSRI addicted, antidepressant chewing insomniacs of latent leftist feminist hostility. This is like the new degraded women, as is you're talking about the new degraded men. The sociopaths in society view everyone as mere tools to their power. Like if you want to go cut down a tree, you pick up an axe. You don't think about the feelings of the axe. You don't think about whether the axe wants to be part of this. It's like, no, that's my tool. I gotta cut down the tree, and I gotta cut down civilization. And if the relationship between the gender has to go, well, that's I don't care. I'm gonna just cut down civilization. I want power. And I need to destabilize society in order to make people dependent upon my power and justify its expansion. So we're literally we're livestock. I've said this in the story of your enslavement. I believe it even more strongly now than before. We're just livestock. Right. The fact that women's happiness has gone down every decade feminism has been implemented, that women are more miserable now than they've been since women's happiness was measured. They don't care. Right. That's kind of the point. Right. And so turning people into this, and most people are helpless to resist propaganda. That's why propaganda works. Most people rely on people like you and I to guard. I can't go in and get rid of the common cold virus with a fork in my body. I rely on my antibodies. It's not a conscious process for me. I just go, boys, do what you need to do. And most people can't resist propaganda. That's why propaganda is so effective and so tempting for people in power. They rely on people like us to push back against it and make sure that these people are exposed. But of course, as they're exposed, they're dangerous. They're feral. They're difficult and predatory. And not us. They're not us. They're not part of us. They're not part of civilization, right? There was an old story about sociopaths in the Inuit, right? The sort of what used to be called the Eskimos. And they'd say, oh, yeah, sometimes there's guys, they eat all the hunt. They pretend that they're sick, and then they try and bang your wives when you go off hunting and stuff like that. It's like, well, yeah, we've never figured out a way to fix them. We just pushed them off a glacier at one point and just get on with our day. You can't do anything to fix this. And the not usness of these kinds of people is really, really important to understand. And as far as, what do you do to be a real man? Well, first of all, check your testosterone levels. Testosterone levels, as I talked about recently with Faith Goldie, have gone down like 50% since the Second World War, going down like 1 percentage point a year for men.
Really?
Yeah. Check your testosterone levels. I mean, it's important. It's kind of one of the things that makes you a man. And, I don't know that the reason for this is in debate. Right? She thinks it's soy. Other people talk to plastic bottles or the water supply, or it could be that as women become more masculine, both as a result of being single moms and as a result of birth control pills, giving them different hormones and so on. So check your testosterone levels. You can't will what is hormonally deficient in you. And men are going to have to be. I'm sorry, you wanted to say something before I moved on to the next point.
No, I was just going to say. Well, I mean, I don't know about all the plastic bottle stuff, and I guess Alex Jones would be a good resource for that. But
well, it doesn't really matter in a way. I mean, just get your levels checked, for sure, and look up, and I guess people will. Of course, if it was a woman's issue, it'd be all over the place. But because it's men, they're kind of disposable.
I was going to say earlier when you were talking about the strength of women, like, I don't know if you know anything about the Mormon Church, but the Mormon pioneers, you read some stories about the women in those companies, and it is staggering. Just it's amazing the strength and the perseverance of those people, men and women alike, and the physical exertion that it took. And I mean, today we're I guess we're fat and lazy, and that we people go home and they watch TV, video games, whatever it is. You talk about how when you write books, you do it. I don't know if this is exactly how you do it, but I guess you use Dragon or whatever that software is, and bike as you do it. And I mean, that's great.
But these days.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's amazing.
I'm dying to find some place where I can look up and I could hike and write a book. That would be fantastic. I mean, I can't sit down in a little notebook or whatever, but you've got to keep moving. I haven't sat down to write a book in probably 15 years or 12 years for sure. So I do the show standing, right, as everyone knows. I mean, sitting is the new smoking. And the other thing, too, is that, as smoking has declined, smoking is a way of enhancing testosterone as well, which is one of the reasons why I'm sure it is addictive for people. So, but yeah, check your testosterone levels. I mean, I think I'm no doctor, but I think that's a worthwhile thing to do if men are out there lacking motivation and so on. But, sure. The story is, of course, Jesus, right? I think that's the relevant one. Jesus was a man. And Jesus sacrificed himself on the distrust of the world in order to save the souls of the planet. Right. And men have become very reasonable in the West, white men in particular, very reasonable. And unfortunately, it doesn't work. You guys have had 150 years to save Western civilization with your nice books and speeches and blog posts, and we're losing it hand over fist. So it's time to stop being so nice. It's time to stop. It's time to pick up the tools of the enemy who've been winning and use it to fight back on their own terms. Mm-hmm. And, of course, this is shocking and appalling to the people who apparently can't eat a cucumber unless can't eat cucumber sandwiches with any skin on the cucumber, and they just need all the don't rattle my china, all the people who are like, I hope that the horse that's thundering by at Ascot doesn't get any mud on my +4s. Manhood is you achieve the objectives, not even despite people's negative views of what you're doing, but sometimes even because, right? But the new rights are willing to be in people's faces. They're willing to use the tools that the leftists have used to win. And they're willing to be difficult. They're willing to, sadly, we all hope that reason and evidence are going to win the day. And we're told that society is founded on reason and evidence, and it's sensible the way things work, and people will listen to reason and evidence and so on. But it turns out they just tell you that to propagandize you as children. And when you grow up, you realize that reason and evidence does sweet fuck all for the most part in society. It's a nice little thing to think about, and I hope that one day we'll have a society where reason and evidence hold sway. But reason and evidence does not hold sway. Just look at the skeptic community and their views on race and IQ. Denial, 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 obfuscate, obfuscate, obfuscate. And when they finally lose the debate, they say, well, but let's say that it's true. What does it matter? How does it help? It's like, oh, come on. Oh, come on. Oh, come on.
Right. Well, I mean, that's.
I mean, what if the Christians had said, okay, sure, we accept the logical arguments, there's no God, but how does it help? And they'd say, well, it doesn't matter what helps, it matters what's true. But now it's race and IQ. Oh, it's got to be somehow mysteriously pragmatic and productive in the long way in ways I can't understand. It's just, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's embarrassing to see people that staunchly in denial about such an essential issue and just bleating on about how, okay, well, maybe it's true, but what does it matter? It's like, who are you to say what the fucking truth matters or not? You're not the arbiter of what's true and what value. Anyway, go on. Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, that's what I encounter on any sort of post on social media that I make is stating any of these viewpoints. I mean, it's always met with first. I said hate before because the first thing that everyone says is, "Oh, you just hate such and such group." And what that does, and this is the influence. Sorry to interrupt. The influence of the
the feminine mindset, which is to translate facts into emotions. And
Right.
think that there's
so,
some sort of rebuttal. I mean, so
Exactly.
like impugning emotional motives to what I'm saying is not an argument, but I guess it feels compelling to some people.
Sure. So, I mean, and whenever I've sort of realized that, I mean, earlier on, back when I was like in high school and I started waking up to all this stuff after I came home from my mission. Cause I mean, when you're gone, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about God 24/7. So, I mean, when I got home, that's when I started waking up to it. And before that, I would always try to be really civil and be really nice. And if someone didn't see my point of view, I would try to explain it to them logically. I mean, and I still do that. But now I've realized that there's really no hope for these leftists generally. And so I've made it my point just to make them look like idiots. And so I'll point
it's become
out
about branding now. I mean, the left in general are losers, which is why they don't want fair rules, and it's why they want stuff for free, and it's why they use rage rather than reason, because they're losers and they're low quality people in general. And like all low quality people, they want to cheat, they want to manipulate, they don't want an honest competition, and they don't like objective rules. And the funny thing is, too, people saying, "Oh, you just hate people." It's like, oh yeah. What about all the people who want white people dead? What about all the people who say that white masculinity is toxic? What about all the people who are talking about some hateful imaginary patriarchy? I mean, that seems to me much more full of hate than anything I've ever heard from anyone not on the left. But it is. I've translated your argument into emotions. Oh man, that's not even a civilization that's worth defending. Not that you could possibly defend it anyway.
Yeah, and what you were saying before, I mean, and so I the nice thing about whenever I post anything is that the comfort, I guess, to me is that the silent majority is always on my side, because I mean, if anyone's looking at my post or if anyone's reading it, I mean, it takes no courage to stand up and defend leftist talking points, because they're the norm, and it's what we've been taught our whole lives, and so I mean, I'll show them that no, I actually don't hate these people, and even if I did, it wouldn't really matter.
Saying you don't hate is falling is it's accepting the parameters of the argument.
But no, I never say that.
My emotional state is not an argument.
Yeah,
you just hate so and so. It's like, well, you apparently hate arguments, and until you're willing to make one, I don't have anything to respond. Falling into the trap of, well, I don't hate those people. It's like, oh, come on.
Well, I don't. What I should say is that I will. I'll make a comment saying, well, I mean, how have you deduced that I do hate people? Like whether or not I do, and it doesn't matter. And then I'll, talk about other points. But it's like what you said. It always devolves into, well, even if those stats are true, or even if what you said is true, what does it matter? It's this kind of nihilistic.
It matters, because if group differences are not the fault of white people, then blaming white people for them is a horrendous injustice. If saying that blacks underperform because of white racism is false because of the racial IQ difference, then blaming white racism is a horribly unjust, racist, vicious act against white people. It's like saying that white racism is why Chinese people are short. I mean, that is horribly racist. If racism is bad, which it is, then blaming white people for something they're not responsible for is horribly, horribly racist. And gets people killed. And the fucking people think that it's not important to talk about. What does it matter? No, you're a coward. I get it. You don't want to talk about this shit. It makes you uncomfortable. So, pick up your fucking skirt and go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's an insult to people who wear skirts, a lot of whom are a lot tougher than that. But I get it. You're chicken. You're chicken. I get it. It's scary. I get it. You don't want to do it. But don't then say it's unimportant to try and rescue your semblance of courage. Jesus. Yeah. Well, what if white people were blaming black people for things that weren't their fault? Would that be unimportant and not worth talking about? Good Lord.
Right.
So, sorry, guys, you're going to have to just stop being reasonable, stop being nice, stop making fun of yourself all the time, and stop rolling over. Unfortunately, we live in a world these days, partly as a result of multiculturalism and partly as a result of leftism. Assholes get their way, and nice guys finish last. We have got back to that Darwinian part of society that we spent hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, desperately trying to get away from. We're right back there now. Squeaky wheels get the grease. difficult people get their way and assholes get to rule. And I'm sorry, if you're going to be a nice guy, you're not only going to finish last, you're going to finish lost in history. You're going to finish gone. You're going to finish extinct. And so, no, you're going to have to, I'm not talking violence or anything illegal, but you're going to just have to be difficult, and you're going to have to be aggressive, and you're going to have to be not so nice. That's going to result in some sacrifice, which is why I talked about the Jesus thing earlier, that is going to require some sacrifice. And there has become this hostility towards masculinity. White males are the only thing that stand between the Marxists and their goal, the leftists and their goal. Of course, all this endless hatred and invective is going to be poured against white males. And so, sorry, you're just going to have to embrace your gender. You're going to have to embrace your ethnicity, and you're going to have to be proud of what you can bring to the world, at least as proud as everyone else. So I would say that no one's coming to save you, and you are in the only last permissible group to hate in the world. And because people are very tense, and a lot of people need someone to hate, you, I'm afraid, have become the targeted laser group of hatred for a variety of historical reasons that are not your fault at all. It's horrible. Right. It's unjust. It's wrong. And being nice about it isn't going to solve it.
Well, I think too, it's difficult for Christians, and especially, I don't know about especially Mormons, but in the church, I mean, it seems like there's this attitude that
it's all turn the other cheek. I get it.
Right. Well, I mean,
it's all forgiveness and let's take the high ground and turn the other cheek. It's emasculation, because too many women have taken over the mindset, and women are not good at patrolling the perimeters of the tribe, as I've talked about before. Women have wonderful strengths and abilities, but recognizing external threats is not one of them for a variety of reasons I've talked about before. But no, there's an eye for an eye stuff, which is it's a pretty important part of Christianity, and this muscular, tough Christianity that really was the norm, the standard in the 19th century. Is something that it's all become this like Unitarian feel-good, nature-hugging bullshit. Of course. And the world is a tough place, and if you don't stand up for yourself, you're going to get plowed under.
Right. I was going to say that niceness has become, I mean, it's not talked about doctrinally, but I mean, it's become this supposed Christ-like virtue. But I mean, the more I've been thinking about it, niceness, like Christ was, from what we read, he was kind to those who were humble and
he whipped the money changers.
Exactly.
No, if you ever want to know who the livestock are in society, there's one very simple test. There's one very simple test to know who's enslaved, who are the livestock in society, who are the subjugated, who are the truly exploited. And it is the group that is not allowed to get angry.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if you ever get angry and people are shocked and appalled and try and put you right back in the box, that tells you immediately, as sure as a brand on your chest, as surely as leg irons on your legs, that you are part of the livestock, that you are part of the subjugated and the exploited. And if you're not allowed to get angry, that really is the very best reason to get angry that I can think of.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, a black guy gets angry about his history, sure. About the present, people are like, yeah, well, listen to that. Women get angry about it, and people get angry, but white males get angry. KKK, right? I mean, this is the one, there's the old saying, if you ever want to know who rules over you, look at who you're not allowed to criticize. But if you ever want to know who the subjugated class is, look at who's not allowed to get angry. So, okay, I'm going to close things off there. I thank everyone for a wonderful 3.5-hour show. Really, really enjoyable. Thank you, everyone, so much for calling in. Your honesty impresses and impresses. Oppresses sounds terrible. Your honesty impresses and amazes me and exalts me. And I find it's a wonderful thing to partake of every single week. Thank you so much. Please check out freedomainradio.com/donate to help this most excellent and important show do its most excellent and important work, which we cannot do without your support. Please, freedomainradio.com/.
Stefan Molyneux. You can go to Stefan Molyneux on YouTube, and you can also go to Free Domain Radio. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, when you look at, what he talked about in that clip, and you start looking at our public education system, and having to deal with Common Core is one thing, but, I've been against the sex ed, being someone that had to go through a sex ed class. It's not beneficial. If anything, it encourages and it makes light and makes sex more into it's just a thing. Where I think, parents would more look at it like, no, that should be something that's very, very special, intimate, and something, you probably should wait to do, not just because you don't want your child to have a kid, but because you also want them to have a little bit more emotional maturity. You don't want them going through that, 12 and, 13. And, well, guess what? They're teaching them this at, 11, 12, 13. And now you also get into where, they will teach all the things about being gay and, that type of sex and things maybe parents don't want their kids involved in. Definitely, your kid's definitely not gay. You might not, want them to have to be exposed to that. Nor do you want, someone that hasn't been through puberty yet to really start looking at things like that. I'm not against letting, people live whatever lifestyle they choose. But I am kind of against, my little boy wore a dress or wore my high heels. I think he's gay. We're going to start, letting him dress that way. Well, there's a lot of little kids that have put on high heels when they're little babies. That doesn't suggest that they're gay, but they're actually teaching that. And, you have them teaching stuff like that in, sex ed, which is not about sexual education. So you start seeing a lot of, well, that's why we probably shouldn't have had sex ed in the first place. But you had, well-intentioned people. That's the thing, well-intentioned doesn't mean that you know what people need. I think families and stuff really should make those decisions. Whether I agree with their decisions, those are their decisions to make. Because maybe my decisions aren't the best. They're the best I could come up with, what I believe to be right. But they might not be the best, and neither are theirs. There is no best. Every person's an individual. When you understand that, then you understand that you as an individual can only do the best to what you believe is right and hope that it's something that they grow to believe is right too, and not something they believe you were forcing on them. And I believe in letting, whoever grow up to be whatever they want to be, but also to, realize that, if you decide you want to be a drug dealer, you're probably going to have to deal with the circumstances of that. And I'm not going to encourage you, or support you in it. I'm going to support you as, my child, not as a drug dealer. And that's a completely different thing. I want to know you're all right. I want to know you ain't dead, but, don't come running to me. And my fans on my machines are kicking into high gear. It's not even that hot in here, but they are running hot today. Now, I don't know how many people might have followed this, but if you've heard of Charlie Gard, you definitely know the story. Charlie Gard's parents are forced to stop fighting for their dying baby. This from FEE.org, Foundation for Economic Education. Excuse me. I cannot imagine the pain Charlie Gard's parents are feeling now. Of course. Okay. As they savor their last moments with their precious child, Charlie is 11 months old and he's dying. Chris and Connie have been fighting for months to get treatment for Charlie ever since he was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition, mitochondrial DNA depletion syndrome. But they have been forced to give up that fight. I can't imagine their pain, but I can imagine their fury because I share it. From the hospital to the courts, Charlie is not mine. I've never met him or anyone who knows him, yet I am furious with the British government for refusing to allow his parents to take their dying son to the United States for treatment, which I want to kind of also break in there. They offered finally at the last moment to allow American doctors to come to him, but the for this treatment to just dive into it, really that Charlie would have needed to come to America. There's that single payer healthcare system everybody wants to taunt over there in Britain. It says here, a therapy trial, his last and only hope. No further recourse was available in the UK, but an American doctor was ready to try to help him at Columbia University Medical Center. Charlie's parents raised 1.4 million euros through crowdfunding. They had the money to take him to the U.S. by air ambulance. But doctors at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London didn't like that idea. And I think everybody should let them know that was a heartless decision. They said it wouldn't help that the American therapy was experimental. They said the baby's life support should just stop. Hold on. If they have the money, they should have the right to take their child to a last resort. On April 11th, a British High Court judge ruled with the doctors empowering them to turn off Charlie's life support machines. His mother screamed no when she heard the verdict. There was a petition with more than 110,000 names on it. People wrote letters to the Prime Minister calling on her to release Charlie from Great Ormond Street's care. The Pope said he was praying for Charlie's parents, hoping that their desire to accompany and care for their own child to the end is not ignored. Even the U.S. President tweeted that if we can help little Charlie Gard, as per our friends in the UK and the Pope, we would be delighted to do so. Charlie's parents challenged a decision in the Court of Appeals in the Supreme Court and the European Court of Human Rights, all to no avail. The courts would not allow them to save their child's life. Again, death panels. Even if you have the money, well, you're only allowed to spend what you put in, or, it's government-controlled healthcare. Who can call this justice? And now Charlie is out of time. According to BBC, U.S. neurologist Dr. Michio Hirano had said he was no longer willing to offer the baby experimental therapy after he saw the results of a new MRI scan last week. It's possible that Charlie's doctors were right that experimental treatment wouldn't have helped, although his parents don't think so, nor do American and Italian doctors. But what harm could have done when he's dying anyway, and if his parents had the means to give him one last chance, why shouldn't they exercise their right to do so? They belong to Charlie just as he belongs to them, and no one but Chris and Connie should get the final say on his medical care. I never really knew what people meant by the phrase death panels before. It was just a term bandied about by talking heads, political personalities. It's chilling how well it applies in this instance. A group of bureaucrats that sits around deciding who's worthy of medical care. I don't know how the power slipped away from the individual, whether taken by force or given away with applause, but this is outrageous and it's wrong. I will leave you with the words of Connie Yates, Charlie's mom. Due to the deterioration in his muscles, there is now no way back for Charlie. Time that has been wasted, it is time that has sadly gone against him. We want people to realize that we have been speaking to parents whose children were just like Charlie before starting treatment, and now some of them are walking around like normal children. We wanted Charlie to have that chance too. All we wanted to do was take Charlie from one world-renowned hospital to another world-renowned hospital in the attempt to save his life and be treated by the world leader in mitochondrial disease. We feel that we should have been trusted as parents to do so, but we will always know in our hearts that we did the very best for Charlie, and I hope that he is proud of us for fighting in his corner. Charlie had a real chance of getting better. It's now, unfortunately, too late for him, but is not too late for others with horrible disease and other diseases. We will continue to help and support families of ill children and try to make Charlie live on in the lives of others. We owe it to him not to let his life be in vain. Despite the way that our beautiful son has been spoken about sometimes as if he not worthy of a chance at life, our son is an absolute warrior, and we could not be prouder of him. We will miss him terribly. One little boy has brought the world together, and whatever people's opinions are, no one can deny the impact our beautiful son has had on the world, and his legacy will never, ever die. We are now going to spend our last precious moments with our son Charlie, who unfortunately won't make his first birthday in just under 2 weeks' time, and we will ask that our privacy is respected at this very difficult time. Mommy and Daddy, love you so much, Charlie. We always have, and we always will, and we're so sorry that we couldn't save you. Again, that's from FEE.org. Go share that article. A very powerful thing. And it also points out the problem with government-controlled healthcare when you start centralizing the power to make the choices on your healthcare. It's not always about what's cheaper. It's about what's better. I'm sure people have shopped at some of these box stores that have that cheaper stuff. And you see how cheap it is. And they carry the better stuff too, and you pay for it. I cheap out on other things. Personally, I've taken my own health into my own hands, not trusting the healthcare system, but we all eventually do need it because we can't be our own surgeons. We can't, view our insides when we feel something weird. There are benefits from what we do have here in America, but it's slowly going away. And if we allow the healthcare to keep going the way it is, you're going to be put into that position. You could raise the money to help your kid for something experimental. Probably be in a different country because, well, we'll be in the same situation where there's not a lot of experimental stuff going on in these type of healthcare industries. We're lucky that we still have a lot of that going on, even though I think there's a lot of stuff put out there that's no good. But I've also seen a lot of experimental stuff that have helped. I'm more for fighting the source rather than, making a drug just to counteract. We know there's a lot of health issues out there that are directly connected to our environment, whether it be our food, air, water. There's definitely a lot of issues out there. So I'd like to, point towards those issues and being able to try to provide yourself with the healthiest options so you don't need so much of this type of healthcare system. But they're also pushing technology to monitor what you eat, when you sleep, how much you walk, when you're up and down. And then, of course, they'll blame you for not doing something. You didn't do your 1,000 steps that Tuesday. I think that heart attack was your fault. It's actually scary to think about it, but we have this whole healthcare system that we can't seem to get rid of. Who could have predicted that? When they were trying to pass Obamacare, and plus you have to pass it to see what's in it. Me and others out there warned, this is going to end up biting you in the butt, because if you pass it, people are like, well, we could change it or repeal it. If you pass it, the likelihood of a repeal is very slim. And you know what gets me? I had a news report that the straight repeal, not repeal and replace, but the repeal failed the Senate. So we're not going to get the repeal. Oh, and by the way, it's a basically exact copy of the repeal bill that the Senate kept passing when Obama was in office, when they knew it wouldn't get signed. So all these senators out there that wouldn't sign the let's just repeal it for now. This bill that you passed before, you had no problem voting for this before. Oh, it's different. Oh, BS. You were willing to pass it before. So this shows that, well, you were willing to pass it because you knew it wouldn't get, it's to say, hey, look, I tried. Look, hey, I'm on board with you. Are they? Because they had that same bill in front of them and they didn't want to pass it. All they want is to rearrange Obamacare. Pop a few things out, pop a few things in, rearrange it a little bit, and call it their health care bill. and pass that. They still want control of the healthcare system. They still want that government ability to control it. And that's why they're having problems with people like Rand Paul. Because they want to repeal and replace. And they want to replace it with Obamacare Light. You need government out of it. You need repeal. Screw, replace. You pass a separate bill that drops these state border lines where, insurance companies can't cross. Don't cross that line. Do that. Let insurance companies battle it out. But guess what? Insurance companies want to do what the banks did. Let's get together and stop battling each other. We can hold rates up. We are cruising through this broadcast here. I really wanted to play this. I had a discussion. I'm only going to play a part of this, but I had a discussion with someone I know from Ukraine and talking about Ukraine and Russia and how people, if you speak out or if you do something wrong, you could disappear. And he didn't. I don't think he believed that actually happens here. Because, he sees what he's allowed to see, basically. And I was, telling him about some of this. And I want to get into a clip real quick. Adam Kokesh, Activist Under Fire. I'm not going to be able to play this whole thing, but we will kind of dive into this here.
By Brianna Bundy and Lynn Ulbricht. And these two women are both in a position where they're doing an incredible job supporting activists and their families who are behind bars right now. So, Lynn, if you would first, please give us, for the people who don't know anything about your son's story, just a quick summary of Ross's situation right now.
Yeah, Ross is a totally peaceful person with no priors and is serving a double life sentence plus 40 years for all nonviolent charges associated with his involvement in the Silk Road website, which was an online marketplace that was the site of voluntary free market interaction with very few restrictions. There were some restrictions that were considered victimizing, such as child pornography. It was not allowed. Stolen property, not allowed. But it was an open market, and it wasn't closely regulated, but there were rules. And illegal drugs were allowed because it was considered a free choice.
No victim, no crime.
And Ross was not convicted of actually selling. He was convicted of, and there's questions about the trial, but that's complicated. But he was convicted of hosting a site where other people did these things. And for that, he is serving a double life sentence in a maximum security prison with violent people in there, even though Ross is a completely nonviolent person.
And Brianna, your husband Mel is in jail right now awaiting trial. Could you give us a background on that, please?
Yeah, my husband is in jail for the 2014 Bundy Ranch, where the government converged on our family in an army and terrorized the community for a number of weeks before the public came to our aid to protest the actions of the federal government and the lack of action by our local sheriff's department and emergency personnel in our area. 2014 ended peacefully with no physical violence taking place on the side of the protesters, and we went about our business and moved about freely for well over 700 days before the federal government decided to indict the men and bring small militaries to gather these 19 defendants up. And they've sat detained for the last 18 months without pretrial release and without the capabilities of preparing for their trial, even being able to view the discovery, which is the evidence used against them in court, and ultimately being blocked an entire defense. They're not even allowed to bring a defense to court. So we're just waiting for our trial date. My husband currently doesn't even have a trial date set. So
what I want to make clear about these cases for people who aren't familiar with the crimes of the American federal government is that we have a disturbing trend today of political prisoners, people who are in jail for crimes that threaten government's power, not crimes that have actually hurt anybody. And what we have in these cases are really offensive examples, but there are many like them. And there are a lot of people in jail right now who need your help. In the case with the Bundys, it's 19 who are still facing various legal challenges. In Ross's case, we have someone who's got a life sentence and is in a really precarious position where all the support that he gets from the outside is huge. We like to think of America as the land of the free and all the other, BS platitudes that they want to throw at us. But the reality is that this government is willing to hurt people to maintain its political power. And it's absolutely critical that not only do we raise awareness about these cases so people can learn the lessons of them and understand the reality of the nature of government, but also that we alleviate the suffering of the people who are hurting because of government's overreach, because government is willing to hurt people to preserve its power. So for those of you who know my story, I was a political prisoner very briefly myself. I did 4 months in jail in D.C., and I can tell you from even that short experience that the support from the outside, to have amazing women like this standing behind you, to have family standing behind you, to have supporters, to have people donating, to know that your mother, when she's fighting for you on the outside, that she's taken care of and supported, that your family, that your kids, when you go to jail, are being taken care of and supported. I mean, it is huge. As you may have heard, if we don't hang together, we hang separately. And right now, there are a lot of people hanging unnecessarily because they don't have the support and attention that their cases deserve. So, Brianna, if you would, tell us a little bit about what Mel and the other gentleman he's incarcerated with have dealt with, and what kind of support you've had and what's been appreciated.
It's just been really a struggle. My baby was 2 months old when my husband was taken. We also had a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an 8-year-old or 9-year-old. So that's what my husband worries about the most, is his children are growing. He hasn't had an opportunity to bond, especially with the baby, and you miss milestones. So that's incredibly difficult. But having letters from all over the country pour in of other people's little children and other parents and grandparents saying that they support him and they're proud of him, and thank you for giving their family hope in America again and in mankind. Thank you for standing up for the Constitution, and especially a lot of them remind them, thank you for bringing prayer back into our home because we've remembered how to pray. And another thing that really helps them are the visits. And I really want to challenge people. This is what I think so many don't understand. There are millions of men and women trapped inside prisons all over this country, and they may be hundreds and hundreds of miles away from their family. If you are in federal prison, they can contract you into any facility in the country. You may not have family that is nearby or has the financial capabilities of getting there to see you. And these small little pieces of the outside world coming in give these men and women so much hope. So if you can go to the facility, go in. I mean, a lot of places you have to be on a list by that inmate so you can ask for letters and write to people and find out who needs a visitor. But a lot of these facilities are just open to the public. You can just walk in and ask to see anyone that hasn't gotten a visit lately. I challenge you to do that, because some people my husband sits in a prison with men that have not had a visitor in 6 to 13 years, and they need the support. Whatever they've been convicted of completely aside, it is a living hell, and it does a lot for these men.
And particularly with the situation with the, can we say Bundy gang? Is that
the Bundy family?
The Bundy family. The Bundy family and their supporters and all of the men who are behind bars with them right now, they really are standing for you. And when you stand with them behind bars, it gives them a lot of courage I have to like really, kneel down before a lot of them to say, like, I took a plea deal because I was bullied into a corner and I let the federal government do that to me. These guys are saying, no, please. They've been bullied. They've been offered plea deals. And it's because of that support. I mean, can you imagine if there's nothing on the outside, right, they would not be in a position to stand up the way they are legally. And so this is something that's an investment in your freedom. So Lynn, I know with Ross, he's had a huge amount of support on the internet. A lot of people write him letters. What has been most helpful for you on the outside too, especially advocating for him?
Well, of course, all the support. We've also had a lot of financial support, which has actually made it possible for us to get this far, and we will continue to fight this, and that has helped us do that. But it's really become a bigger fight as well. And I really want to say that I think we too here exemplify how we come very different cases, very different people, and we both have very common experiences. We show how the government is overreaching and they are putting into prisons thousands and thousands of people. And it's become a money-making, power-grabbing industrial complex that
you can check the rest of that clip out, Adam Kokesh, on YouTube. Check him out. Activists Under Fire. You can also go to activistsunderfire.com. Check that out. And, this is a lot more important than people understand. You're talking about there's a lot of people that are being held illegally. They're not being, they don't have a trial date. They're still being held. They're not, given any type of bond, even though they're not a flight risk or not, they'll show up to court. It's not like they're going to go on the run. That nothing legitimizes other than intimidation and abuse of power. Ross Albright isn't going to, no one's going to be hurt by him being out. You got the Bundys. No one's going to be hurt by them getting out unless you try to take their property. Which, if a burglar broke into your house with a weapon and, try to threaten your life and take your property, you would probably shoot him if you were able to defend yourself. Which that's a natural right. That's a constitutional right. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We are coming up towards the end of the broadcast. Don't forget to go to ucy.tv. You can click the little support tab at the top, donate to UCY, or you can also scroll down bottom and shop Amazon through ucy.tv. Same great deal, same great prices, and UCY gets a little kickback to help cover operating costs. Oh, my choice for metal. I love gold and silver. I think it's a good investment. It's not, the only investment you should make, but it's a great investment. Amagi Metals is my choice for metals. If you want to check them out, go to antityrannynews.com/metal. That'll take you straight to Amagi Metals. And you can check out all their great prices, shipping rates,